So let's go towards the next topic. Before we go to the next topic, we have some other headlines in the NBA right now. So this is just released breaking news. Zion Williamson is leaving the bubble to attend an urgent family matter. And some other news is Rajon Rondo is out for 6 to 8 weeks after suffering an injury, and De'Aaron Fox is out for at least a week after spraining his ankle. And Rashawn Holmes and Bruno Caboclo have to quarantine 8 days after leaving the bubble on accident. And so let's go back to our topic that we had, and it's been about 4 months since the trade deadline, and we have some big moves. We had some big moves this year. We have seen the impact players had on different teams and how it helped them. With these players on the roster, it can help them a lot as they can hope to make a deep run in the playoffs this year. So, which team do you think benefited the most from these trades?
Well, since we're talking specifically about the 22 teams returning, I'm going to have to say the Heat and the Jazz. Now, look, before anyone gets mad at me, Marcus Morris was traded from the Knicks to the Clippers, and although he's very good, the Clippers, they were already the team to beat, and I won't say they benefited the most because they were championship favorites. And now let's go to the Heat. The Heat got Andre Iguodala, Jay Crowder, and Solomon Hill in a three-team trade with the Grizzlies and Timberwolves, in which they gave up Dion Waiters, Justice Winslow, and James Johnson. And I think this benefits the Heat a lot. Dion Waiters and James Johnson were reportedly causing problems in the locker room, and they wanted to get rid of them for a while. And now they got great return for those two players. And Justice Winslow is a player that showed potential and a young player that they might have wanted to keep, but he still has yet to prove himself in this league. And I think it's definitely worth it because Andre Iguodala is a lockdown defender, and he only steps up his game in the playoffs. And he's definitely going to be important to their potential title run as a dark horse candidate to win the championship. And Jay Crowder, he was best known for his days in as a 3 and D role player for the Boston Celtics 2 or 3 years ago. And although he has yet to regain that type of touch because he's shooting about 31 to 32% from three this season, he will be an important role player for the Heat, and I do think that he'll be able to find his touch in the playoffs. And Solomon Hill, to a lot of a lesser degree, he's a Jay Crowder type of player that can shoot well. And generally, I think this trade was a great trade for the Heat to win now. And I don't think they have to worry about their future because they have people like Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero, and Kendrick Nunn to lead them into the future. I think they could have sacrificed Justice Winslow, and I think it was the right move for them. It's definitely going to play out good for them as long as none of these players get injured. Now, the Utah Jazz, they traded Jordan Clarkson for Dante Exum and 2 second-round picks from Cleveland. And Jordan Clarkson is their spark plug from the bench. And he's averaging 16 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists per game off the bench, and 2 made threes a game off the bench. And let's just say he's basically the identity of their second unit for the Jazz. And let's forget about stats. Let's talk about winning. Ever since the Jazz got Jordan Clarkson, they went 23-10, including a 10-game win streak in their first 10 games with him being on the team. And that's really incredible, especially because before him, they were 18-12. And that's not bad, but Clarkson definitely helped them with their chemistry issues and fixed them and elevated their play by a large margin. Now, I don't know if he'll be able to help them in the playoffs because they did lose Bojan Bogdanovic because of his wrist surgery, but he's definitely a piece that will help them win for a couple years to come.
Yeah, I think the biggest deal for me is the Clint Capella deal. And you look at Clint Capella, he was only the one of the two players that got traded during the trade deadline, and he still has 3 years left on his contract. If you look at the other players on that got traded, they're on their last year of his deal. So the Atlanta Hawks, I think they had a great move by trading for Clint Capella, so that Trey Young can have a rim running big that can run to the basket and get boards for Trey Young. But I think an underrated move, like you said, was Jordan Clarkson. and he helped the team a lot since they were arriving. And like you mentioned their win record since he got there, he was 23 and 10 since he got traded to the Jazz, and he's really stepped up his game, and he's really proven he's really been a solid piece off the bench and the sixth man that the Jazz needed. And I think he'll step up even more with Bojan Bogdanovic um, out to the season since he has wrist surgery. And like you didn't mention the Clippers won because they were already favorites to win, but this just solidifies themselves as a title as the title contender and probably the favorite to win it. Marcus Morris helps the Clippers, and after he got traded from the struggling New York Knicks, he's helped them with their depth as they now have a lot of players like Reggie Jackson, Markieff Morris, Lou Will, Patrick Beverly, Montrezl Harrell, and he just helps them in that depth, especially during this time where you don't know if players can get injured with this short amount of time and these games that are being played. This just helps the Clippers be a favorite towards the championship and possibly win it this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. That depth is going to help them a lot. And like you said, Jordan Clarkson is probably going to step up in Bojan Bogdanovic's absence because of his surgery. Now, what do you think is their ceiling because of this injury that Bojan Bogdanovic had? Do you think they're like a second round team, a conference finals team, which is unlikely, but is it possible? Do you think so?
I think you look at the standings right now, and if the season were going straight to the playoffs like today, they would face the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I think that's a team that they could easily beat. I'm not saying that they could sweep them, but I think it would go to a 5-game series because even though the Thunder are a good team, the Jazz have just more experience because they beat the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I know they have Chris Paul this year and they have Steven Adams, but they have young players like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who hasn't really been in the spotlight, and this year he's going to be the guy. He's going to be the main man for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I think the Jazz could beat them with Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, and Jordan Clarkson. And I think they could get to the second round, but I think that's where they'll get beat by one of the LA teams or one of the or the Nuggets or the Rockets, whoever makes it to the second round. I think they'll get beat there because of the absence of Bojan Bogdanovic. I think he was a really great player for the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But going back to the Clint Capella thing, I have to disagree with you because he's making a lot of money over the next couple of years, over 10 million, 10 million, 12 million over the next 3 years. And I think that could be a problem because I don't think he's worth that much, very frankly, because he's been, last time we saw him like fully healthy was like in the 2018 run against the Kevin Durant, Steph Curry Warriors in that Game 7. Last time we saw him, he was doing great when he was fully healthy. But that's the problem. He's not fully healthy. And I don't know if he'll continue to have nagging injuries for years to come. Hopefully he won't because it's never good for anyone to have injuries. But I just don't know that he's worth that money and he was worth everything they gave up for him.
I think the Rockets just were just like playing him a little bit early, and he hasn't really fully recovered from his injury. So we have to see when the Atlanta Hawks play him next season, or if they play this season if there's a second bubble. But some teams I really wish they didn't trade for a certain player, or teams could have used a player or two to boost their roster and help them win games this season. So which teams regretted their trades or regretted not being active?
Well, I'm gonna have to go with one team. Your Dallas Mavericks. And I think they're really going to regret um, being inactive on the trade market. And that's because the only trade they made was for getting Willie Cauley-Stein from the Warriors for a second round pick. And look, the Mavericks have their stars, Luka Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis, and they have their role players like Seth Curry, Jalen Brunson. You have Dwight Powell. Like, there's so many players that they have. Of course, Dwight Powell's injured, but he's still a great role player. Other players like Dorian Finney-Smith, JJ Barea, they have a lot of pieces that are very good for them. But I think they could have used another player, someone that they could use to be their spark plug off the bench. Now, this team did rank 11th in bench scoring, but the problem is they don't have a go-to guy past Kristaps Porzingis or Luka Doncic. And like we mentioned before, that's why the Clippers are favored to win, because even past their superstars, they have 5 to 7 people that they can rely on every night, like Marcus Morris, Lou Williams, Montrezl. So many players that they can count on to step up if their star players aren't doing so good. And because of that, because the Mavericks don't have that third guy that they probably will need if they want to go deep into the playoffs, I think that'll haunt them in the playoffs, because that's when the defense focuses in a lot more and gets a lot tougher.
I have to disagree with you because you look at the Dallas Mavericks team. They have Luka Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis, and the true third option is Tim Hardaway Jr. He's had a phenomenal season this year, and he's been a great player since he's been inserted into the starting lineup. And you said that they're not going to be going to go deep in the playoffs, and I agree. They're not going to go deep in the playoffs because they're not a title contending team this year. They're just here to make the playoffs and hopefully get past first round and maybe the second round. But I don't think they're legitimate title contenders because their players are still young, still developing, and they still have they in the next couple of years they're going to have a lot of money to sign a big name free agent possibly. But I think the teams that regretted not being active was yeah, not being active was the Heat when they traded for Andre Iguodala. He hasn't really been the same player that he was with Golden State, and I know he's not an offensive player, but he's not worth $15 million because he signed a 2-year, $30 million extension this year, and I don't think he's really worth that for the Miami Heat because if you look at the future, this season they have a lot of cap space, and possibly next season they could get another legitimate superstar like Giannis Antetokounmpo or Chris Paul or LeBron James. They could get those players. And having Andre Iguodala, even though he's a defensive player and he comes up clutch in the playoffs, I don't think he was really worth that $15 million. And another team that could have traded a player was the Oklahoma City Thunder. You look at them and they're 18th in 3-point percentage, and they could have traded for a guy that can be a 3-point shooter. And I think they could have traded for Doug McDermott. He was a great player, and he knows
Go ahead.
He knows the Oklahoma City Thunder system. And even though the Thunder are more of a mid-range team, I think when you get to the playoffs, they're going to lock down in those areas. And I think they need a guy that can shoot from deep.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you there, because I don't think they shouldn't be buyers at this point. I think they should be sellers at this point, meaning they should be the ones looking away to give pieces to get assets back, because they're not going to be a title contending team anytime soon, even with this great team that's surpassed all the expectations that led them to the 5th seed, and Dennis Schroeder, Steven Adams, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Chris Paul. They're a great team, but they're not going to be a title contender. And I think the Heat know what they're doing when it comes to Andre Iguodala, because he hasn't been as he was before, because he's getting into a new system. He's played less than 20 games in that system, and before that he didn't play a single game for the Grizzlies, and because of that he's still getting his legs under him in terms of getting his conditioning down, because the Heat are a very hardworking team. That with Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra. And because of that, I think he's worth the maybe not 15, maybe $10 million. But I think they still have enough cap space to sign a big time free agent, even with him being there.
Yeah, if you look at the Heat record of them signing big free agents, I don't think it was a great deal, because you look at the other players that they signed. They signed a James Johnson to like $16 million, Tyler Johnson, Dion Waiters, and those are right now those are average role players, and they haven't really been the players that the Heat thought they would. So I don't know if that's a great deal for the Heat, but we'll have to see when the NBA season resumes.